Imagine two families united with their children, living together since they were little, mutual and complete trust between these families. Even though they weren't related, the children grew up calling the adults from these families uncles and aunts. A kinship by affinity, let's say. They became so close that these people became godfathers and godmothers to each other. But there was a monster among them, growing, spreading its wings, getting bigger in their midst. Someone above any suspicion, like in a script written by a completely insane mind. Evil was there, living side by side with the victim, as if it were a sister.
If anyone knows about these criminals, please let them surrender. Let them surrender to justice, as they will be found anywhere they go.
And this anger mixed with frustration is not just from Leslie's relatives. Many people want to know the whereabouts of this monster who lived under the skin of a lamb. The murder of this 22-year-old American young woman of Mexican origin destroyed her family and shocked the entire community. "Why did they do this to my daughter?" said her mother. "They didn't have to take her life that way." Even today, the authorities and the victim's family still wonder where Eric Rangel-Ibarra, the murderer of young Leslie Palacio, is. Law enforcement agencies throughout the region continue to ask the public for help in locating the man in the photo. He has been wanted by the police since 2020. Eric Rangel-Ibarra was also recently featured in the Nevada State Police's Fugitive Friday social media post on November 17th, 2023. And the more this guy's face circulates on social media for everyone to see, the better. That way, there will be one less monster among us. And this post also mentions that Eric was last seen near Durango in Mexico, although it doesn't specify when that happened. This is a case with many loose ends. And the main one, of course, how this man is still free. Was it an investigation error? Lack of will from the authorities? A perfect escape? Well, that's what we're going to find out in today's episode. I'm Marcos. Welcome everyone to Insólito. Like, comment, and share our content. Make sure your notification bell is turned on because, as you know, sometimes YouTube goes there and removes your subscription when there's no engagement. I completely understand that sometimes people put on the video, go do other things, and end up not having time to like or comment, right? Okay, but if you like our work, give us that support. Click like, leave a comment, even if it's just an emoji, because that really helps us here as independent content creators, okay? This way, you also keep your channel subscription. Last but not least, consider joining our members club and tag me there at the Insólito on the photo network. Deal, messages delivered. Let's get to the facts. That fateful and never-ending night began when Leslie Palacio went out with a childhood friend, a young man who was well known and almost part of her family for decades. But when she didn't come home the next day and nothing was known about that friend, the Palacio family started to worry. What they didn't expect, and what never crossed their minds at that moment, was that the young man they trusted so much had something to do with Leslie's disappearance. Leslie was the second daughter of Araceli Palacio, and she was born in Las Vegas, Nevada. Even though she wasn't the oldest sister in the family, Leslie always took on that role. While her mother worked long hours at a housekeeping job, it was Leslie who made sure her sisters did everything they were supposed to do. Like, for example, schoolwork, organizing the house, and helping with various chores. Besides that, on many occasions, she even cooked for her sisters, making sure everyone in the house could eat and had everything they needed. After she became an adult, Leslie kept worrying about her family. Soon after, she started working and helping out financially. She enrolled in university and began a lab technician course. She always told her classmates and sisters that they also had to work hard and study to get ahead in life and look for, something better. But what Leslie wanted most was for her mother, Mrs. Araceli, to work less and less. So she gave her mother an idea. instead of working for companies that assigned her houses to clean, she should start her own cleaning business. Since she already had regular clients and a lot of experience, clients who really valued her work. So, in the end, Leslie's mother decided to accept the proposal. And that's how the Palacio family's cleaning services company was born. You can really see that Leslie was a very focused, unique young woman who apparently had a natural talent for doing business to improve her and her family's lives and gain more comfort. In August 2020, the family business got its first major contract. They were very happy then. It seemed like everything was set to be the beginning of a new era for them. And as we've seen so far, Leslie played a very important role in this story. Even though the young woman had many activities in her daily life, whether because of work or studies, she always made sure that everything in the company was organized and well done. But the family's fate was about to change dramatically. And everything started to fall apart on a Friday, August 28th, 2020. They went from heaven to hell in just a few hours. On a Friday night, almost Saturday already, Leslie wanted to have fun and decided to go out with some childhood friends from decades ago. And one of them was Eric Michel Rangel-Ibarra. At the time, he was 25 years old. And Eric, as we've already seen, wasn't just a friend. The Palacio family and the Rangel family had many emotional ties. They were practically family. The children practically grew up together. They were like brothers, cousins, you know. To give you an idea of how close they were, Guadalupe, Eric's mother, was Leslie's godmother. Araceli and Guadalupe were very close friends. They were, because at that point in their lives, when everything happened, these families had grown a bit apart. For trivial reasons, guys, like the rush of daily life, new commitments, routines, just things that are common in most people's lives. So it kind of makes you drift apart, but obviously you still keep the bonds, you keep the friendship. It's just a matter of not seeing each other as much because of these daily activities. I'm saying this to emphasize that there wasn't any kind of fight between them, no confrontation, no misunderstanding, nothing like that. It just happened. They kind of drifted apart, but they still considered themselves pretty close, friends. But before that, during the childhood of the two main people involved in today's episode, their families used to attend the same parties and dinners. It was basically as if they had grown up like cousins or brothers. They were very close. The Palacio family trusted Eric blindly. All this context is very important. I'm emphasizing it here so you can get an idea of the evil that sometimes hides itself like a wolf in sheep's clothing, This is definitely one of those stories. The night of August 28th arrived. That Friday, Leslie didn't have any plans to go out with Eric. She actually wanted to go out with one of her friends, Caroli, and some other friends from their group, right? But those people left home before Leslie. And when she decided to look for them, they were in a place that was very far away. So Leslie wasn't really willing to go that far. According to Leslie's sister, the two exchanged text messages early in the evening, and on top of that, they also made FaceTime calls. But even though she was talking to her sister, the fact is that in the end, Leslie ended up deciding to go out with Eric. It was almost the 29th because it was a little before midnight when he went to pick up Leslie at her house. They lived on the same block. From there, the two young people went to have dinner at a casino. They spent some time there and had a lot of fun in the place. Leslie told all of this to her own sister through the messages they were exchanging. Well, nothing strange had happened up to that point, right? Very well. The sisters then kept communicating until around 4 in the morning when they exchanged their last messages. However, the strangest thing of the night happened at that moment. However, in that message it was written that she, Leslie, had to tell her sister something. Her sister replied then, asking if something had happened. Obviously, she became apprehensive, curious to know what her sister was going to tell her, but Leslie didn't reply anymore. So, her sister waited for about an hour. Seeing that she didn't get a response, she decided to call Leslie's phone. This was already around 5:40 in the morning. Leslie's phone was already turned off because it went straight to voicemail, to the message box. Her sister wasn't too worried because she knew her sister was with Eric, who was a very trustworthy person, and that possibly the phone had run out of battery or had no signal. No warning sign had been triggered yet. And it was already Saturday, and the longest Saturday of their lives. Since it was the weekend, everyone at the Palacio family's house got up a little later than usual. Leslie's mother went to call all her daughters, but when she went to Leslie's room, she realized the girl wasn't home. She then started asking the other daughters where Leslie could be. The girls told their mother that Leslie spent the night with Eric. Araceli then called her friend Guadalupe's house, that is, Eric's mother. And that's when everything starts to take a strange turn in this story. No one at the Rangel household was answering the calls. Up to that point, everything was fine, but as the hours went by, the concern grew because no one was returning any of the many calls. Nervousness then took over Leslie's family, and they started to think that something serious was happening. Still, they chose to wait a bit longer until late Saturday. Guadalupe Rangel-Ibarra answered the phone. Guadalupe told Leslie's mother that she didn't know where Eric was. And in a somewhat rude, harsh way, she added that her son was already an adult man and she wouldn't get involved in his private life or his business, and for that reason she wouldn't call to ask where he was. Now, from that moment on, the Palacio family became alert, and they started to think, what do you mean, all right? If you don't know anything about your son or the girl who's with him, who's practically your daughter too, your niece and all that, they live together there. Aren't you worried? Then respond rudely by saying you don't want to be involved with your son's whereabouts. Ali, the first little red flag, actually a big red flag, started to go up, right? Leslie's sisters then decided to go to Eric's house, and when they got there, they knocked on the door. And even though you could hear people inside the house, no one opened the door for them. That's when one of them decided to call the other members of Eric's family, and one of the sisters answered the call and they talked. The sister was much more communicative than Eric's mother, helping with the description of Eric's car, as well as mentioning the places he used to go. Well, since they couldn't get any more concrete information about the whereabouts of the young people, Araceli then decided to formally report her daughter's disappearance, thinking that maybe her friend Guadalupe would want to do the same. And she talked to her, who again said she wouldn't do anything and would rather wait for her son, but Araceli didn't feel the same way. She went to the Nevada police, and the officers said they would have to wait at least 72 hours before they could consider the young people as missing. Yeah, the 72 hours. When the family said the young woman was 22 and with a 25-year-old man, the police initially assumed that the two were not missing, but had simply decided to spend some time alone. But this was promptly refuted by Leslie's family, who said there was never any romantic relationship between Eric and Leslie, and that they had a fraternal relationship almost like siblings. At least that's what they thought, especially since Leslie loved her job, was studying, and also had the family's newly created business, which had come from her idea. There was no reason at all for her to want to run away, in quotes, with anyone. As I already told you before, she was a very responsible young woman. She never missed home, never missed classes, so for them, all of that was very unusual. But Leslie's family decided to start searching on their own, without the help of the police. The family then made posters and started putting them up in the areas near the casino where the young people were supposedly seen, and also near their home. The family also spread the word about the disappearance on social media, where they posted a photo of Leslie on every platform they could. And they asked everyone who might have any information to contact the family. That way, in just minutes, Leslie Palacio's disappearance was already going viral. But as we know, the internet isn't a place with only good people, right? It didn't take long for a lot of false information to appear. And one of them, look just how absurd this is. In one of them, they even asked for $10,000 to release Leslie. The family was desperate at that moment. Not knowing what to do, they ran to the police and showed them the demand for the large payment. Now, with this ransom demand, the police began to take the disappearance of the young people seriously. It didn't take long for them to find out where the message came from, but in the end, it was just a scam. People trying to profit from the pain of a desperate family. Yeah, for people who are at least somewhat normal, let's say, it's something inconceivable, unimaginable, right? You demanding money? Trying to scam someone who's going through the pain of a disappearance must be a cutting anguish, right? The person goes there and takes advantage, calls and says, I want money to release them, deposit it, then put it in a certain place. Didn't this happen in a Brazilian case? About the boy from Franca Wesley, we've already told his story here on the channel. People, even today, he's still missing. It's been many years and people keep prank calling the family. How cruel, isn't it? But getting back to the story, with all this happening, the police officially started the search. They looked for Eric at his workplace, went to his friends, but there was no sign of him. 3 days after Leslie's disappearance, the police gave very important information at a press conference, where they said it was impossible to locate Eric Rangel and his father, Jose Rangel, 45 years old. That's right, the police didn't find the son or his father. Another strange thing about this case, what was happening is that when talking to the Rangel family's neighbors, they said they had seen very strange behavior during the days following the disappearance. Because both the mother and the two sisters were taking things out of the house. Some neighbors even thought they were selling some old furniture and also some decorations, which is very normal over there in the United States. But it also seemed like they wanted to leave the house, as if they were suddenly moving out. Gradually, they loaded items into a truck and cars, which arrived empty and left full. Really, it was all very strange. Son and father disappear and the women of the house decide to move. It seemed like something was wrong there, didn't it? And obviously there was. The neighbors also said they hadn't seen either Jose or Eric himself for several days. Of course, all of this caught the attention of the authorities, who called Guadalupe and her daughters to give statements, but they refused to go. And up until that moment, the police couldn't even force them to do that, because they weren't considered suspects. Only their behavior was pretty suspicious, right? So they didn't know anything about Leslie, that's what they said. But that statement seemed at least a little odd, considering they had such a close relationship with the Palacio family, despite that gap in time when they weren't talking anymore and so on, which I mentioned to you. Honestly, it felt like they refused to provide any information. That's how it seemed when you spoke to them, right? Observing police work, talking and taking statements. It's like they knew something that would help lead to the whereabouts of the young people, but they just didn't want to talk. How can your brother, your son, disappear and you just don't care? He starts making some changes around the house. Weren't the families supposed to be close? But we might also think, I'll call Leslie, who disappeared. But police were questioning Eric's family too, since he was missing as well. So, if you don't call, aren't you basically signing a statement that you're not worried because you know where he is? Creepy, isn't it? The only person who, after a lot of insistence from the police, finally said something about what was happening was one of Eric's sisters, who ended up giving some information to the Palacio family. The young woman said that on Saturday she saw her brother come home very nervous and grab some of his things. And he said he was going away with his father for a few days, but without saying where he was going, where this place was. The police, who were already somewhat suspicious of the Rangel family, now had their suspicion level at maximum. Because it seemed more and more that not only Eric Rangel-Ibarra had something to hide, but his family was also hiding something. For those of us following the story, it's obvious, right? They were clearly hiding something. But for the police, who always need concrete evidence to accuse someone, it's a tough situation, isn't it? There's subjectivity here. You say, the family doesn't care that he disappeared, but that's still subjective, right? Who knows if they're really just cold like that, maybe a little crazy. With the investigations underway, the police then checked the casino's security cameras where the young men went to have dinner. The footage showed that they arrived in the early hours of August 29th. It was around 12:30 at night when they went to eat at that place. From the footage, you can see that they seem relatively calm. They're talking. In the video, you only see two friends hanging out with no strange behavior. The two of them appear to be sober. Everything seems fine, calm. According to the footage, they leave the place at around 2 in the morning in Eric's vehicle. These would be the last images released of Leslie alive. With this footage in hand, the police had grounds to request an arrest warrant for Eric and his father, Jose Rangel. The police also tried to locate Eric's cell phone, but discovered something even more bizarre. Eric didn't have a cell phone. Yes, that's right. Eric didn't have just one cell phone. He had several phones. Some of these phones were prepaid or disposable phones, which is pretty common in the United States, the kind that are used only once, like we see in movies and police shows, right? The prepaid phones didn't have a line. They only get activated when they receive a charge, a top-up. And by looking at the phone's top-up history and how they were activated, the police even thought that Eric was involved in illegal activities. The hypotheses raised by the police, without any proof at this point, so they're just hypotheses, are that Eric was involved in human and drug trafficking. Since this kind of behavior, like having numerous phones, is very common for people involved in that kind of business. Another unusual fact is that one of Eric's phones was set on fire on the afternoon of the 29th, the day he was seen with Leslie. The signal was located in Vail del Fuego State Park, a place about 75 kilometers from the casino where they were last seen. From there, Eric dialed a friend's number, and it was a call that lasted only a few minutes. Of course, the police called this friend in to give a statement, and the young man said that Eric had asked him to go to Vail del Fuego and bring a can of gasoline, saying that he couldn't buy it himself because he didn't want to be caught on any camera buying gasoline. This obviously made his friend ask what was going on. He told his friend that he had committed a murder, that he had killed a quote-unquote bitch. Very good friend, Eric, right? Very good friend. The Rangel family with the Palacios. But we don't know if this friend took the fuel to Eric or not. The police tracked this guy's phone and found out that he was at home all day. So the police ruled him out of any involvement in the crime. And also from the fact that he knew more than he had said in his statement. The authorities from then on, with all the information, decided to increase the search for Eric and his father. The police asked citizens for help and started sharing photos of Eric and his father to see if anyone could bring any information that could help find the two. According to information from within the family, the Palacio family was not confident in the police's work. For them, from the beginning, it seemed like the authorities were not taking Leslie's disappearance seriously. There was a moment when the media reported that there was a second recording from a security camera belonging to one of Eric's neighbors. Actually, the video was not initially released by the media. People just heard about it, and the police refused to describe it in much detail at the time. However, later the video became public. And what was seen in this recording is that the security camera was filming directly at the door of the Rangel-Ibarra family. And so it's possible to see how Leslie and Eric arrived home, somewhere between 5 and 6 in the morning. And they also said that you can tell that at that moment she was already a bit staggering, as if she were drunk. And Eric seemed a little drunk. They went into the house, and then Eric left at 6:30 in the morning, alone and without a shirt. He gets into the car and half an hour later arrives at the house again with a man who matches the description of your father. And because of this resemblance, the authorities began to assume that this second man was Eric's father. The two of them enter the house, stay there for about 20 minutes, and after that they come out carrying a girl in their arms. Leslie, what is not known is whether at that moment she was already lifeless, but she was no longer moving. Everything indicates that it was no longer a missing person case, but rather a case of a dead person, which then completely changed the course of the investigation. What we had now was a homicide case, even though Leslie's body hadn't been found up to that point. More than a week had passed since the disappearance. It was September 11, 2020, the day when Leslie's body was finally found, very close to Vail del Fuego State Park. We remember that this is the place where Eric made the last call to a supposed friend. So it was the last place where, through the phone numbers he had, he could finally be located. The suspicions about Eric grew a lot. He was no longer just a supposed suspect. He became the main suspect in everything that was happening. Because the investigation was ongoing, the forensic report was not made public. The cause of Leslie's death was not known, nor were any details that might have been found on her body disclosed to the public. The little that was known up to that point was what was released by the victim's family. It was reported to the public that Leslie was badly burned and had to be identified by DNA. They believed that Eric had left the young woman in the desert, under the sun and out in the open, to erase any trace of himself, of Eric, from his victim's body. But this is unofficial information. The official report has not yet come to light. But in a hearing, in the transcripts of that hearing, Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Officer Gary King detailed that the body was black due to the high degree of decomposition. The pants was several meters away, and the young woman's underwear was being worn incorrectly. The body also showed insect activity, you understand, right? Well, later, what the police reported is that blood stains were found in Eric's room, and the police determined it was human blood. But again, they kept the investigation confidential and didn't say anything about whether or not it was Leslie's blood. Eric's car ended up being found in California, which means in another state, right? And the vehicle was abandoned in a parking lot. To make matters worse, just a day after they found Leslie's body, the three people from the Rangel family who were still at home, that is Eric's mother and his two sisters, left and never came back. They simply stopped answering calls, not just from the Palacio family or the police, but from everyone who knew them. At that moment, they went into hiding and nothing more was heard from the women, which again seemed very suspicious and strange. The police investigations continued. They believed that both Eric and his father were in Mexico. This was due to some statements from friends and family who lived in California, because that's where they found Eric's abandoned car. They then began most of their searches in that area due to its proximity to Mexico. There in California, the police interviewed relatives and friends of the family, and they said that both Eric and his father asked for help to cross the border into Mexico illegally, obviously. They wanted to leave the United States in hiding, since they already knew there was a warrant out for their arrest. Relatives and friends told police they didn't help because they feared trouble. The police, in fact, still don't know what might have happened at that time, but it is known that they crossed the border. That's because an app was able to locate Eric's father's iPad, Senior Jose, and that iPad was in Mexico. And then comes another thing that was heavily criticized by Leslie's family members. Because even though they had seen the iPad's location in Mexico, the authorities didn't say exactly where in Mexico the device was. Just a reminder, Mexico is a large country. This precise indication of the signal's location could have helped the investigation a lot, because it's very different to search an entire country than to search a more specific area. All of this made Leslie's family think that the police didn't care about her case at all. They weren't doing a good job. The young woman's mother then decided to reach out to various media outlets to ask for more support, not just from the authorities but from the public as well. But even so, as quickly as possible, days went by, and those days turned into weeks and then into months, and there was still no information about Eric or his father. They simply vanished. The family kept asking the authorities, but nothing, no news that could ease the pain and anxiety of the Palacio family was brought. The year 2020 came to an end and 2021 began, but there was still no news. Until in February, a light appeared at the end of the tunnel. On February 12, 2021, police reported that Jose Rangel, 46, had been arrested on January 19 in San Diego, California. On January 31, he was moved to a Nevada prison. Jose Rangel confessed his guilt, his involvement in the charge he was facing, as an accomplice to committing murder and also for destruction of evidence. He told the police that he was with his son in Mexico, but that they got separated. Jose Rangel received a 2-year prison sentence, the maximum allowed for serious misdemeanors. He ended up serving 8 months in prison. Currently, Eric Rangel-Ibarra is a fugitive, and according to the police, it is most likely that he is still in Mexico. And those who follow Insólito here know, right? We've already presented several cases from Mexico here. Let's just say it's a pretty good place for him to keep hiding, The police still believe that his father knows exactly where his son is, but he won't say anything. The mother and the 2 sisters, who are not involved in the crime, probably know as well, but no one can get in touch with them. They can't be questioned because that family branch isn't part of the legal proceedings. And, according to Dr. Ofelia Markarian, the Palacio family's lawyer, there have been no recent leads about Eric's whereabouts. The lawyer added that the Palacio family misses Leslie very much. Quote, "Her absence has caused the family not only pain and suffering, but has also left a big question mark, a big why. She was a beautiful soul, and it is very, very sad that this happened to her. But what makes it all worse is that we haven't even been able to catch the killer." Leslie's family obviously felt that Jose Rangel's sentence was far too light for the crime he committed. They feel like it's a slap in the face and that there's little hope left, but even so, they still keep their faith. After a while, Jose Rangel received a lower sentence because of a revised Nevada statute, which sets a maximum 2-year prison sentence for accomplices to a crime. We also agree that this sentence is extremely inadequate, too low, right, for Eric's father's involvement in the crime. Supposedly, it is part of their legal system. Sub-laws we aren't authorized to discuss. But the fact is, currently, the Palacio family hopes to change this law, but they need more public support for it to reach the legislature. The family also hopes that Eric Rangel-Ibarra will be found soon, that someone sees something, hears something, and gives a tip that could lead to this guy and finally end with his arrest. The family's lawyer concluded by saying, if anyone knows Eric's whereabouts, don't believe any story he tells you. He doesn't deserve any protection. He needs his day in court. And this, as you can see, is Eric Rangel. At the time, he was 25 years old. He doesn't have any distinguishing physical features. He doesn't have any visible tattoos. He has a very common body type in Mexico, let's say. Everything makes it easier for him to keep blending in among honest people. So that's how we wrap up our work for today. With that question, what could have led Eric Rangel to commit such a brutal act against someone he had lived with his whole life? With whom, supposedly, he had a fraternal relationship, almost like brothers. It's sad. We hope that Leslie's family finds peace and that she obviously finds peace as well. Thanks for tuning in. A kiss from the redhead. See you next episode.